Great, thank you. Very honored to be here. We all hope that you will learn something new about calculation groups, so let's get in. Thank you very much for the introduction, so I can probably just skip this first slide and well, I come from Excel, as many of you, I think. So let's get in. What are calculation groups? This is more difficult than you would think. I mean, even many videos just skip that part and say, well, it's a feature that you can do this and that, but what are they? There's a, sorry, there's a nicer slide. This is the one I wanted to show you. That I have a short and a long definition. No? The short is, there are like some expressions, DAX expressions, that replace the measures that are present in their scope. We'll get into the details of that. And here's a longer one that Ken Snyder shared when he was on Heaven to VI. And it says, okay, it's a set of one or more DAX expressions. I made some changes, called calculation items. We'll get to that. Which are represented as rows of a column that can be applied through the filter context of a report and have the default behavior of replacing any measure, and I say value and format string, that exists in the filter context created by the calculation item. Yeah, so it will work like a column. So imagine you have a column, but when you put it in the filter context, instead of just filtering the data as a regular table would do, this will replace the measures that you have there by something else. Yeah, but it's like, well, but I want my measures probably. Well, it's okay. We can play with the value of the measure inside that. Anyway, this has been around Power BI since July 2020, even though it existed previously in analysis services from the previous year. I read that in the DAX, the definitive guide of DAX, and I thought, whoa, this is so cool. I said, but it's not yet available in Power BI. I was like, oh, come on. But then when I saw it, I was like, okay, now it's the time to get into it. Anyway, second point, why do we need calculation groups? Okay, there's a zillion use cases that you can use that. And it's like when nothing works, then maybe a calculation group will help you. Huh? First and foremost, which is always the use case shown around, is to reduce the number of measures by centralizing the logic in a single place. So when you have like a sales amount or whatever, but then you want the previous year and the year to date and the month to date and back and forth, all these variations at the end are like just a calculate expression with that measure in there. And then it's like, oh, but I also want the total cost. And then, oh, I have to do all the measures again. Well, we'll see how we can get to that point. And this is the use case that we'll see. But there are many more. Calculation groups allow you to build visuals that would be impossible to show. Like in tables, you can put the several measures with the different variations as columns, which would not be possible. Also modify the model for all measures at once. If you a relationship that is with order date, but you want it to delivery date, you can change that for all measures at once. You don't need all the two versions of the measure using just relationship for each of them. You can do it with a calculation group. Also, you can make relationships that cannot be modeled. I made a blog about it. It's like you have your customer and you have your product table. But I have an account manager which manages this product for this client, and I want to filter by that. You cannot do that regularly. But with a calculation group, you can put it there around all the measures. You can make some tree task thing that will make this filtering happen. Also, SQL VI made a blog about it, and I made like almost a copy with a much simpler use case on how to set default volume slicers through a calculation group. And also you can play with data labels of charts, because we can go into the format string and you can force there to show like the value of something else. And also you can even like change the transparency or light level of color measures. But this is the use case of that is a bit difficult because you cannot really use color measures in so many places. So this is something I came out with, but I still finding hard to apply in real life. And many more that I haven't thought about it yet. Or somebody, I don't know, but they are there, the use cases are there. Anyway, let's go back to the first one. Yeah? basically it will reduce the number of measures. Now, how do we build calculation groups? Of course, we'll get into practice, but first of all, you'll need an external tool to do it. Yeah? Power BI alone does not allow you to create calculation groups. And I don't know. I don't think it's going to change in the next month or so because, yeah, I said, okay, they say, oh, there's tools already, so use them. And here, you may be frightened by what I said. No? This DAX expression is going to replace your measures. But, and here's the nice thing, while doing that, you can use these special DAX functions that are not available regularly, which is selected measure. This is like having the measure, this is a placeholder. Yeah? So you can build your expression and say, and whatever measure that is in the context, put it here. So you build all your calculate statement, and then instead of sales amount, you put selected measure. And then if the selected measure sales amount is there, it will use sales amount. If it's total cost, it will be total cost, and so on. This is the most important one. If you just do that, if your calculation item is this, then the calculation item will do nothing because it will take a measure, will return the same measure, which is very important because we'll see that we need to limit the scope of calculation groups. So if it's none of the measures I want to play around, just return selected measure. Very important, yeah, because it will replace all the measures. So for many of them, you just say, don't do anything, just return the selected measure. But then to establish which are the measures that are there in the scope, you need to know, well, who is it? Then we can use two functions. One is selected measure name, it will return the name, and then you can check if the name is one of those that you want to change. Or you can pass the measures as an argument to this function. It's selected measure, and then you put the name of the measure, boom, 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 and then it returns true or false. And then for the format string, you can do something similar to the selected measure, because measures have a format string of their own. And sometimes you want to play around with it, and sometimes you don't. So for these cases in which you just don't want to mess anything, just you have to return this selected measure format string. Okay? This is so you know that this exists. And how do we use calculation groups? Okay? So as it was explained briefly in the definition, it's like a column. So if this column is in a matrix, all the measures that are there will be affected by this calculation group, and will show you the previous year or a year to date and so on as columns in a matrix, which is already very useful. But if you want, you can also place them in the filter panel, no problem. Or you can use them as a filter in a DAX expression. So you put the calculate, then you put the measure, and then the calculation group, the calculation column, and the name of the calculation item. And it will return the year to date or whatever. So it's also useful. Also be aware that sometimes there are measures that you don't think they are there. But for example, if you are using the color measures for color formatting, the calculation group will also apply to them, even though you don't see them physically in the visual. Okay? Okay, then. Now, here's the use case that we want to do. This is what happens most of the time. It's like, oh, but I want all these variations, and you just multiply the number of measures you have for all the variations that they ask you to put, and it becomes quite unmanageable. Yeah, because sometimes you want to make the slight changes so that there is no last year value for the future, stuff like this. So you would have to go through all of them, and just picking the right one is a lot of work. And this can be transformed into this, okay, in which we just have the basic measures, that like the sum of this column or whatever. And then we have the calculation group. This, you see calculation group, it doesn't look like any other thing. It looks like a table, which is many ideas. Is like maybe we should have like a special icon because it's not a regular table anyway. And here we have the name of the calculation item and an ordinal. So you can define also the order in which you want to set them, so that if you put them in a column, in the columns part of the matrix, so they will display in a certain order. Okay. So far, okay. So, we'll finish then the theory first. And then what happens if there are more than one calculation group together? That there is like the precedence, and then it's like each gets inside of the other one. Basically, just remember that higher precedence, it will end up further out in the expression. So if you have, this is one calculation item, which has a higher precedence, and this has another one. So basically, the lower one will end up here, you know, like this. And this is something that we can change into the tabular editor.
Bernat, you're on mute.
Bernat? Maybe.
Sorry. Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Okay, I don't know why it happened. I'm not sure. Anyway, did you get more or less until here? So now we're trying to build a calculation.
I think, yeah, you went on mute just as you actually switched to the Power BI.
Okay, maybe there was like some weird shortcut that did that for me. Okay, sorry about that. So here, you see we have just 3 tables, and we have some measures here in the sales one. Well, I have a whole bunch, but we'll see if we can simplify that with the calculation group, okay? So, as I was saying, I'm not sure if you are familiar with time intelligence. I just share with you that sometimes around where I'm consulting, you see people like building a year-to-date column in the calendar. Don't do that. Don't do that. We have functions for that. Yeah. So there is first of all, you need a date table. Point 2, you need to use these functions. Yeah. And so that you filter by 1 year, and then it will return the previous year. Because some people also like hard code, you know, like the measure for 2019 is like filtering the date table by year equals 2019. Don't do these things. Okay, so how do we build the calculation group? So here in external tools, there's one that's called tabular editor. Yeah? It has like an open source version and a commercial version. Yeah, I recommend the commercial version, at least the basic one, if you are serious about Power BI, because it's so good. Here is this, but you can create in both. Yeah, so feature-wise they are the same. It's just about productivity. So what we want to do is to create a calculation group in our model. So what we'll do is we'll just right-click here in the tables and say I want a new calculation group. Okay. And here we just call it like a manual calc, because later I'll show you how to create it in one step with a script. Okay, it's already there. Now, all calculation groups have, as we saw, a column, which by default is called name. I recommend you to call it exactly the same. Manual calc group, because when you put it in the filter pane, for instance, then it's hard to remember which is which. And since it has no real meaning because there's only one column, just call it the same. And now we have the calculation items. So here's when we create a calculation item. Okay. So here, for instance, we always, this is a good practice also, is to have one item which does nothing. So if you have like a ready button, then you can like decide, okay, I don't want it to affect anything now. So this could be like current year. Yeah. And here the expression would be very easy. It would be like selected measure. In the open source, you don't get the IntelliSense. That's one of the biggest selling points of this one. And for the format expression, you see we have the two expressions. No? So each calculation item is two expressions in one. And the format string is like, what do you want to do with this format string? I say, I don't want to do anything. So selected measure format string. For format string, you can leave it empty, but I would recommend you to like fill it with this at least. Okay, say, okay, Bernat, this is not so complicated. But now we can create another one. Yeah, let's imagine that this is like the previous year. What would we do with, for instance, we can, if you're not sure what to type there, because maybe you're using the open source one, no? It's difficult to type with no IntelliSense helping you. So you can grab your regular measure, okay, just the expression, we don't need the name, and you here, and then remember, we don't want to always use this one, we just want to use the selected measure. So just replacing this will create your expression. So any measure will come here, and this calculate will be calculated around it. Okay. So once you're happy with it, you can save it back to the model. And when you come back to the model, you'll see that you get this yellow thing. It's like, well, there's calculation group that need refreshing. This is when you create items or when you create a new calculation group, you get this. When otherwise you don't. And here we saw the manual calculation group and just one column, because what we create are actually rows in that column. Okay. So let's simplify this a little bit. I'll just leave the cells. Right, we'll just leave one measure for now. Okay, we'll convert this to a matrix. Oh, where is it? No, but I want this also as rows. Okay. Now, what happens if I put this here? You see, I see it current year and previous year. And not only that, it works. So for 2008, for previous year, we get the actual value that we have for 2007. You see? So this is a good way to work. However, as some of you might have realized, it's like, Bernat, this is not right. I mean, it's right, but it's not right. I mean, if we are living in 2009, I don't want you to tell me that the previous year value for 2010 is going to be this current year value, right? And now we're switching a little bit away from calculation group for a while, and we're focusing on what is time intelligence and how you do time intelligence. And my answer to all the Reddit questions I answer sometimes is like, go to daxpatterns.com. Yeah, and daxpatterns.com is a site by SQL BI, and they already found all these little things, and they come up with a great solution to them. So read it and use it. But for time calculation, so basic time calculation is like previous year and so on, these expressions are always the same, right? So we have a measure, and then, okay, we need a column in the fact table that checks if we already have data for that date and so on. There are general things, not specific to any particular model. So I thought, well, maybe we can like build a calculation group with that definition. And for some weird reason, it wasn't there. So I said, Bernat, this is your mission, right? So let's do that. Here, this is, if you don't know tabular editor, this is also great. You can write scripts there so that do things to your model. So here what I'll do is I'll open my time intelligence calculation group, and boom. And here we have like C# code that looks very creepy, but it's not that difficult. Yeah, and in the tabular editor 3, you can get like a macro recorder that does lots of heavy lifting for you. So don't be afraid to look. And here in this script, there is two parts. The first one is when you configure it, because there's a lot of parameterization to be able to adapt to different models, and some extra functionality that I build later on that. And then there's like the actual stuff, right? So don't modify this with all this. Okay, this is correct. So it actually, what is the name that you want the calculation group to be built, and the column, and what is your fact table. And where is the fact table date? What is the main date that is like that you want to follow for establishing if you have data or not for a certain date? And then also from the date, you need to establish what's the name of the table, the column that contains the date. And the year is because there is also another script which creates like some dynamic labels based on that. But we'll not get too lost on that. And then this is like a measure and a calculated column that SQL BI definitions include, so it will be created for you as well. And now, do you remember? Oh, we didn't do that in our manual calculation group. Let's go back a little bit once, so we can see what I meant. For the previous year, for example, yeah, this is one measure. Imagine that, I don't know, well, this is not that bad, but sometimes if you do a division or your subtraction and stuff, you really want to limit the scope of your calculation item, because otherwise maybe you have a dynamic title as a measure there, and then it will break, because it's like, I cannot subtract text from text. And so always you need to put some protection there. And how you do that? So basically, you put an if statement or a switch statement if you want. If, and then it's like, and then we use, oops, sorry. One of these special functions that I was telling you about. And then you can use selected measure, for instance, and you can put here, well, like the sales amount. Okay, and total, oh no, or where I have a margin, or well, I don't know, whatever, yeah? So you can just type all the, hello, because I have a team, all right, okay. If this is one of these two measures, then do this. And then at the end, you always add. Otherwise, selected measure, okay? And then you close it. This is protecting this, the damage that your calculation item can do. Same with the format string. You have to do the exact same thing. Okay, but now try to imagine if you want your calculation group to act on, I don't know, 10 or 15 measures, or even worse than that is that you have a lot of calculation items. You have like 8 or 9. Remember that each calculation item has a expression and a format string expression, or for what it's called, format string expression, exactly. So if you go with this approach and then create a new measure that you want to be affected by the calculation group, it's like, oh, wait a minute, and then you have to go through all the calculation items, both expressions, type it in, and it's a bit a pain, I would say, right? So for this script, I came up with another approach, which is to use the other function that we have, which is selected measure name. Yeah? And then it's like how I can centralize a list of measures. Well, I don't know if there's better approaches, but what I did is to create a calculated table in the model that just contains all the measure names as rows. So, and this is why it's here in affected measures table name. So it will create a table name with this name, which has this column, and then it will add all the selected measures names as values of this table, okay? And here it creates a couple of measures that that have this dynamic label thing. So if you use that measure in the context, so say you're doing a year on year, and you have calculated, and your filter context is 2007. This measure will return you 2006 versus 2007, which is quite nice, because otherwise, why maybe it's not so easy to understand for your users. Okay, and and this is some extra thing that when you're using dynamic labels, so that things don't break too much, because sometimes you need to signal there's different calculation groups, but it's a bit too complex. So I'm not sure. Oh, okay, it's 30. Okay, let's try to execute this, right? Since I developed that with that model, we don't need to change anything, because we have our sales and we have the order date. Wait, sales quantity. maybe I'm not showing all the columns here, right? Sales. No, it's just hidden, sorry, because we have, yeah, exactly. The order date is, since it's a column that creates a connection to the date table, best practice is to hide these things. Okay, so it's there. The order date is here. Here you see it's so powerful to use the tabular editor. You get all the information where you want it. So anyway, we can execute this. Let's do it. So we execute it. No, okay. It says, but you didn't tell me what measures should I use. That is correct. So we can say it in two ways. I skipped that part. So you can either select them. So if I select this and sales amount, total cost, it will affect only these measures. Okay. If you want it also to affect measures from other tables, it's not so easy. Yeah? Sometimes it doesn't really select. So you can also type it here, like this, and it also works. It combines actually both lists. But we selected these measures. And well, we'll skip the total cost and see if we can then add it later. Okay. So now I execute it. Now it says okay. Okay, it didn't say anything, so it's good news. And here we have the time intelligence. Okay. And the time intelligence affected measure calculated table, which is by default already hidden because you don't have to do anything with that. It's just for internal use of the calculation group. And we can have a look at how those calculation items look like. So here you see that if selected measure name is in the values of that table, and then here's the expression for current year, then selected measure. And then here it makes even another case for the label as value tal, and then it returns the year of the filter. And otherwise, if it's neither of both, then selected measure. This is the easy one. So for previous year, you get pretty much the same, but of course it does two things, one for the label, one for the actual measure, and so back and so forth. And things get more and more complex. But then, well, let's see if it works. We save back to the model. And now we come here, and then the new, so we have to refresh it. And now maybe we can skip this one, and we use the brand new one. Here, I didn't follow the recommendation. Oh, hello? Is there a problem? Anyway, so here we see that we don't get this future last year things. So because this already been taken care of on how the expression is built. We want to go back and check here, previous year. You see this is a date with sales, must be true. So if you don't have sales, it will not be included in the table that looks to the previous year. So that's why it doesn't show future values, so to say. Okay. So this is SQL BI, like certified definitions with no effort on your side. You just need to configure the script, which is available on my GitHub, and just run it. And you have at least all the basic stuff. Okay, if you want, month over month stuff like this, maybe you'll have to type a little bit, but you already have a really good head start. And yeah, and you even realize that here, for instance, you see that the year-on-year percentage, it's shown as a %. How is that done? Let's have a look. If we go to one of these, well, if we go to a regular one and we go to the format string expression, here, if it's one of the affected ones, it's true. Selected measure format string. No, this is previous year. Okay, so for previous year, you just get the regular one. This is just for the for very specific dynamic level thing. But when we go to one of these percentage one and we check this, here we see, well, this is some extra thing, but basically what we're doing at the end is replacing that with the percentage format string. Yeah, so we override what's on there. And here what we're doing, this is something that is necessary because when we create this dynamic labels thing, sometimes we don't want to break it because, and here's this character is kind of like, don't break it, and so that another calculation group can come later and realize that this format string has already been modified, and in that case it should not be touched. So that's this extra thing here. But basically, if this is the case, don't touch it. Otherwise, then just apply the percentage. I'm not sure. Is this clear what I'm explaining here? Because now we have around 10 minutes left, and maybe it's a good time to check if you have any questions that you want to get into. I don't know if there's anything on the chat or something.
Yeah, I mean, there was just one question, Bernat, I think it was more like a script. But I think you said it's on your GitHub, is that right? So if you could paste it
definitely.
Chat, that would be great.
Yes, it's here in my DN. Okay, maybe, I'll just show that real quick here. So, for calculation groups, wait, is it going full screen? I don't know what is going on.
Might look on the screen, maybe.
Okay, now keep it simple. Are you seeing it correctly, or just?
I've seen the presenter's view. Yeah.
Okay, that's
better now. Yeah.
Okay, well, keep it simple because calculation groups are hard to debug. You don't get to see what's the final DAX expression that is being evaluated. So when you have several of them at the same time, it gets very complicated. So keep it as simple as you can. As I said, always limit the scope of the calculation items so that only the affected measures will be affected. And then also I said that you can make like a measure that maybe it's defined as calculate, this other measure with this calculation item stuff. And then maybe you choose to put that in another calculation group scope. I tried that, it's very complex and it normally doesn't lead to the answer you want. So I would recommend to stay away from such approach. So just apply them as filters, all at the same level, so to say. And then I didn't talk about that, but you could, define one calculation item using another calculation item, like calculate, selected measure by this other, but it's allowed, but it's only like once. And it's better if you can just avoid it, just do it. So when I presented this script on Twitter, I got like some very creative or some constructive feedback. It's like, Bernat, be careful because it's not the best approach. And even like Marco Russo said, like, yeah, maybe since it's a script, I have the definitions there, so I can just reuse them instead of going and say use that calculation item. I have that definition, so I'll just reuse it in the code. And then now the GitHub is Bernat Agulló Esbrina. So also from the blog, there's a blog post dedicated to that. So I think it's like called like Time Intelligence a Smart Way or something like that. And there's a link also to the GitHub. And even there's like a couple of videos on the YouTube channel. Please subscribe so I can get to 100 subscribers and get a decent URL. And that's about it, really. Very happy to be here. I don't know if I can be a bit more helpful in any particular area. I was really afraid of writing scripts until I saw somebody else doing. So it was Johnny Winter from Grayskull Analytics. He did another one that you should check out as well for replacing, because we said we can replace. So also that's another approach. So you have like a dummy measure which does nothing. And then you have several calculation items which just replace that for an actual measure. And that is helpful in several use cases. And you can even combine that with this. So you can get like time intelligence in any measure that you choose. So stuff. This is, you can be very, very creative.
So I think most of the questions have been answered. I guess one thing from is it possible just to, so even though you've got a calculation group,
yes,
is it possible just to have a single calculation item from that group on a specific visual?
Yeah.
Or do you always have to bring all of them across?
No. You choose it's like any other table in that sense. So here you say, yeah, this is Overkill Bernat. So you just go here and say, no, I just want this and this. It's
okay.
Very easy. So yeah, you can just use it as it comes and then just choose whatever items you like. The only shortcoming here is, of course, that here this is written. You cannot put here the actual thing, but well, here you can try. If you put this label as value, if we put it here, let's see what happens. So for current year, you see it shows the actual year, right? But if you go to the previous one, let's see if we can get to see it. So here, we're filtering by 2008, it will return you 2007. Yeah. So, but this is one label, so, and it's a measure, so sometimes it's a bit difficult so that this alone is useful. This comes very handy when you add another script, which is also a block, which will create another calculation group, which will make for the line chart, make that no labels are shown, but the only one, and this last point will have the dynamic label there. So this is also very, very cool, but at the same time, it takes a lot of memory, so only for very flashy dashboards. Well, this alone was okay, but when you put on top some tooltip, then I don't know, it became a little bit crazy, but I don't know, you have to experiment and see what happens.
Okay. And you said that the calculation groups are quite hard to debug as well. So
yeah.
Are there any tips or anything that or best practices you would recommend?
Yeah, beyond keep it simple, and also for me that's very hard to understand precedence. So, but really, when I got to that point in which higher precedence means like it's the highest precedence is the last calculate, so the one farther away from the measure. So then you can understand which is the filter context that will see each of the calculation groups when it's evaluated. So if you remove the filters on the outer one, then you see what will happen to the inner one and stuff like that. So this is more or less the approach that I would take. Here maybe we can try, I don't know, this crashed in another demonstration I did, so I don't know if that's gonna work, but here for instance you could choose maybe then to use the label as value measure. Oh, you see it doesn't let me select, you know why? Because this dummy measure is, it has no value, should be string. Now probably it will let me. Okay, where is it? Title. If you have questions, just this is not so relevant now. Label as value measure. Now I can select it. Okay, but here's the no calculation group yet. But now we can bring the time calculation here. You can also put in a slicer. Wait, in a slicer. And then you can and here you see it. That is nice. So you want to see this, or you want to see that, or you want to see these, and the format strings work. And maybe here in the table you want to see all of them. So this is just like any other table. You go to Edit Interactions, and you say that this one should not be filtering. Okay, this is already not filtering, but I didn't add it yet here as a column. Right, now it is. Okay, it's recalculating. Okay, so you choose for the chart only, but in the bottom you get all of them. That is also convenient. Yep. Any reaction, something that you expect?
That's really cool.
Even you know, like having several measures and you want to have the current year and the previous year, just like this is not possible just with measures. I don't know, you would have to come with a lot of cards or something like it. So calculation groups are good because you can show a lot of information in a compact form as well. Plus, you see, I don't have now I could delete 90% of these measures. Yeah, so anyway, let's connect and ping me if you have any doubts about calculation groups. As you can see, I love talking about them. And otherwise, Kane Snyder is really good also with this, and he's also very kind. So either of us, we can certainly come up with some solution to yours. Not sure if there's anything else I can share with you all.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a hand up. Jose Eduardo, hand down. Can you combine cal groups with measures coming from a disconnected table? Measures coming from a disconnected table. I mean, calculation groups are not connected to anything. So it will leverage the existing connections that are there. So I'm not sure if that, I forgot one thing that it should not be important, but sometimes it is when you're using calculation groups, implicit measures fail to work. So there is a property in the model that will get updated when you create one of them, which is called Discourage implicit measures, but actually it's like disable. Yeah, so where is it? Discourage implicit measures. You see, if this is true, I say no, but I want them. The property value is not valid, and here it says property must be set to true when a model contains calculation groups. So it's very explicit on why it is true. So be aware of that. In any case, you should not be using implicit measures. So use tabulator. With tabulator, you can easily create lots of explicit measures as well. So do that. And I don't know any the recorded. Yeah. Okay. Looks like people liked it.
Yeah. No, it was.
Great.
Really good turnout, and I think thanks to Christian as well for putting some links in the chat there as well for the blog and your GitHub script as well. It's been really useful. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's really great, Bernat. I think thank you very much for presenting that. I'm sure that a lot of people's minds are now probably, swimming with the different possibilities of how they can use calculation groups now.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay. Christian said there. I don't know if that's Christian just posted something else in the chat there, Bernat. I don't know if you want to have a quick look. I'm not sure what the answer would be.
I know calculators are not connected to anything, but let's say that you need a disconnected table to use switch and present one measure at a time. Suppose that measures can be leveled. Yeah, because it will evaluate it anyway. So if inside Power BI you can make a calculate statement and put that measure there, which you can in that case, it will work the same with the calculation group. It's like if you put some of a DAX jacket around any measure.